Drawing has been a part of my life since I can remember. That transition from life in Korea to the United States was really difficult for me. I think drawing allowed me to externalize everything that I had kind of held in. I think I said that it wasn't my first language, but I think it was my second. Hi, I'm Samantha Yun Wall, and I'm here at the Seattle Art Museum with my solo exhibition, What We Leave Behind. In this work, I am researching my family history. It's about the immigrant experience, and it's all through the lens of my transcultural and multiracial perspective. The female figures in my work, in my mind, they are based on family members. There's a lot of untold history and shame and silence that surrounds what women in Korea went through during the Japanese occupation, during the US occupation. My mother told me some stories, and I know that these women in my family suffered quite a bit and have sacrificed quite a bit for me to have opportunities that they couldn't have. You know, I think it's important to sort of acknowledge the pain, the sacrifice. I think to gloss over all of that is a disservice to what we've had to do to get here. Working with silhouettes and working with bodies that don't have that specificity allows me, and maybe allows audiences also, to embody those figures, you know, that they can see themselves within those bodies. I can see myself, I can see my family. I think it opens the door for more possibility than what I and my family have experienced. What we leave behind isn't just loss, but it's also some of the things I think that we've chosen to cast aside so that we can move forward more hopeful. And I think we need that right now. I chose to focus on the Pasque flower for a couple of reasons. I saw this flower growing in my neighbor's yard, kind of this furry plant that didn't feel like it belonged in the Pacific Northwest, and I didn't know what it was. I just knew it felt out of place. And then I came across the tail of the granny flower. In this tale, this grandmother decided to visit her granddaughters one winter, and she visited the first two, and they were just busy with their lives. You know, they didn't have time for her. And she decided to attempt to visit the third granddaughter. And on that voyage, she passed away. The third granddaughter found her body, buried her near her home, and then in the spring, she found the Pasque flower growing from her grave. The flower's head kind of droops down and the stem curves, and it reminded her of her grandmother. That tale, you know, it speaks about loss and family, maternal sacrifice, and all of those qualities, all of those themes have shown up in my work, but they're also part of my Korean upbringing. And so for me, you know, there's like a mystery about it, there's some like potential, and this work allowed me to explore that. There's elements of the grotesque, you know, there's some body horror that shows up sometimes, but I also want to create work that feels very calm. You know, even the space, my studio, I have to create an environment that's really like nurturing so that I can be as vulnerable as I need to be to make this work. And I hope that audiences connect with that vulnerability and, you know, maybe reciprocate. The process of creating these pieces has evolved over time. I primarily work with carbon-based media, and so, you know, it's ink, charcoal, Conte crayon, graphite. I've developed a really like complex and intimate relationship with these materials. There are two pieces on a material called Dura-Lar, which is a synthetic paper. And I love it so much because it's semi-translucent, it feels like vellum. There's something about the images on that work that feel kind of ephemeral. Even the application of the ink is heavy, they still feel very light, and I like that. And so the way that I make these is I hand cut stencils. Some of that I do in Photoshop, some of that I do through collage. And then I use this tool that atomizes ink. I think of it as kind of a rudimentary airbrush. And I build up those darks through layers, so that's what creates the pinpricks of white. There's a kind of like velvety quality to that, and I really love it. The pieces that are on Claybord, it's very similar, but this Claybord, it just offers so many other, you know, possibilities. It's covered in a thin layer of kaolin clay, which is the same clay I used in porcelain. And so I can go in with etching needles and scratch into it to create a lot of those like fine lines that you'll see in the Pasque flower and in the hair. You know, I think that there's a kind of perception that drawing is something you do that precedes painting. I have such a deep history and love for the material that I've never viewed it that way. You know, it's always the final piece. I hope that something unexpected, that can still happen. I want to leave space for that, and you know, it does. Like, originally, the eyes in the Pasque flower weren't planned. It was like this impulse to include my family more directly in the work, you know, some element, but I couldn't quite imagine it, and it was after I printed out their faces that I knew right away that it was, you know, including an eye that made the work like snap into place.